The man who had it all, and the life he didn't. He stopped to buy flowers for a marriage proposal, and then saw his ex with 2 twin girls, who looked exactly like him. Hello, everyone. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. And don't forget to like this video and comment on what you would do in this situation. Adrian Blake had always lived by a plan. Calculated, strategic, and impeccably timed. He was the golden boy of tech entrepreneurship, a self-made millionaire before he was 30, and a name that investors not only respected, but feared. His entire schedule was planned down to the minute, and today was no different. Everything had been prepared: the ring in his coat pocket, the reservation at a private restaurant, the smooth proposal speech he had practiced twice that morning. By tonight, he was supposed to be engaged to Veronica, the face of a luxury fashion brand, and the woman everyone assumed was the perfect match for a man like him. He wasn't nervous about the proposal, at least not in the traditional sense. He liked control. He liked life to fall into line. This marriage was supposed to be the next logical step, the merging of 2 perfect lives. But a restlessness felt under his skin as he drove through the city, something he didn't want to acknowledge. He told himself it was adrenaline, excitement, just nerves. The flower shop he stopped at wasn't on his itinerary. He drove by it by chance, a small shop tucked between a bakery and an old bookstore, with a crooked sign that read, "The Blossom Co." The shop was nothing special on the outside, a little worn around the edges, like the kind of place that hadn't changed in years. He almost kept driving, but at the last second, something drew him in. Maybe he wanted the lilies. Maybe he wanted a break from perfection. Maybe he just needed a moment to breathe. When he walked in, the bell over the door jingled, soft and nostalgic. The air was warm, damp from the plants, and filled with the scent of soil and jasmine. He barely had time to take it all in before he saw her. She was crouched over a bucket of white roses, her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun, a pencil tucked behind one ear. She wore a plain apron splattered with pollen and dirt, and when she looked up, Adrian felt his pulse stop. It was Isabella. His Isabella, or at least, the woman who used to be. Time ground to a halt. In the 6 years since they had last spoken, Adrian had convinced himself she belonged to another life, to a younger, simpler version of himself. Seeing her now, so real, so close, shattered that lie in an instant. Her eyes met his, and something unreadable flickered in them. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't joy. Just recognition, and then the flicker of a wall sliding into place. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice even, as if they had never been anything more than strangers. He opened his mouth to speak, but then 2 small voices chimed from behind her. "Mama, we're done with the baby roses." Adrian's head turned automatically. 2 little girls, identical in every feature, peered out from behind a flower cart, each holding a small watering can. Blonde hair, blue eyes. 5, maybe 6 years old, dressed in matching pink overalls, rosy cheeks, bright eyes. They looked like they had been playing in petals and dirt all morning. They looked like him. Something inside Adrian buckled. He stared as the girls ran to Isabella's side. She knelt and touched each of their foreheads with a tenderness so natural it took the air from his lungs. She whispered something to them, and they giggled before running off toward the back of the shop. Adrian hadn't moved. His heart was pounding in his ears. His thoughts were shouting over each other, struggling to catch up with what his eyes had already confirmed. They were his. They had to be. The age matched. The resemblance was undeniable. But no one had called him Daddy. No one had said his name. It was as if he were invisible in a life that should have been partly his. "Do you still want the lilies?" Isabella asked, her tone flat, but her eyes sharp. He blinked, realizing he hadn't said a word since he walked in. He nodded automatically. She went to the cooler and picked out a small but perfect spray. She wrapped it in brown paper and tied it with a string. The whole time, she didn't ask how he had been. She didn't demand an explanation. She didn't seem angry. She seemed resolved. When she handed him the bouquet, their fingers brushed briefly. It felt electric, and then it was gone. Adrian took the flowers. He paid, saying nothing more than a quiet, "Thank you," and he walked out of the shop like a sleepwalker. He got in his car. The ring in his coat pocket felt heavier than it had that morning. He was supposed to be heading to Veronica, to champagne and candlelight and his carefully prepared life. Instead, he sat in this parking lot of a flower shop, staring at the closed door, his mind playing an image on a loop. Isabella, surrounded by flowers, and two little girls with his eyes and her strength. He never made it to dinner. He didn't call Veronica. He didn't even drive home right away. Because in that moment, Adrian Blake, the man who had everything, realized there was an entire life he had missed, and it had been growing perfectly fine without him. The next few days passed in a haze Adrian couldn't shake. He went through the motions. Meetings, investor calls, product updates. But his focus was fractured. Numbers blurred on screens, voices faded into background noise, and every free second was tormented by the memory of Isabella and the twins in that flower shop. The resemblance wasn't something he could dismiss. It wasn't just in their features. It was in their energy, their expressions, even the shape of their smiles. He had spent his entire adult life mastering the art of logic, of clear-cut decisions and cause and effect thinking. But now he was caught in something completely out of his control. And the weight of it was suffocating. He hadn't told anyone, not Veronica, not his assistant, not even the mentor who had become a second father to him. He couldn't, because if he said it out loud, it would be real. And he wasn't ready for that truth. He had walked away from Isabella years ago, thinking it was for the best, thinking his ambition couldn't coexist with love. He had told himself that she deserved better, someone who wasn't buried in deadlines and ambition. But deep down, he knew the truth was simpler and uglier. He had been afraid of commitment, of being vulnerable, of building something that couldn't be managed via a spreadsheet. Now he had proof of what he had left behind. Two small, undeniable parts of himself he hadn't even known existed. And what was worse, Isabella had raised them alone. She had done it without contacting him, without asking for a single cent, without publicly exposing him. It wasn't pride. It was strength. And it terrified him. By Friday, he couldn't take it anymore. He canceled his morning meetings, ignored Veronica's messages, and found himself once again in front of the same flower shop. This time, he didn't walk in with a script. He had no idea what he was going to say, only that he couldn't leave again. Isabella looked up the moment the door chimed. Her expression didn't change. Today she wore a different apron, one with a faint lavender print, and her hair was in a loose braid that made her look even younger than he remembered. The girls were not in sight, which gave him a small sense of relief. This conversation was not something they should hear. "You came back," she said, not with surprise, but with a certain weary knowing, as if she had known this was inevitable. "I need to talk to you," he said in a low voice. In private. She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the risks of reopening a door she had long since locked. Then she nodded toward the back room. 5 minutes. I have deliveries coming soon." The small back room was cluttered but organized, filled with buckets of stems, a battered wooden table, and the scent of fresh greenery. Isabella closed the door behind them and leaned against the wall with her arms crossed. She didn't offer him a seat. Adrian hesitated. Then he exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Are they mine?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, not with malice, but with the sharpness of someone who had been alone for too long. "You really want to start there?" I have to know." "Yes," she said simply. "They're yours." The words hit him like a freight train, even though he already knew. Still, hearing it was something else. The floor shifted under his feet. "They're 5 years old?" he asked. "They turned 5 last month," she replied. "Their names are Clara and Martina." Adrian sat down slowly on the edge of the table, suddenly lightheaded. "Why didn't you tell me?" Isabella's laugh was bitter, quiet. "Tell you what, Adrian, that the man who disappeared overnight, who chose his company over a future with me, had fathered twins. Do you think I didn't want to? I did. But you didn't leave a forwarding address. You didn't even leave a goodbye. And once I realized you were gone for good, I made a decision. I wasn't going to chase you down to be a father if you weren't ready for it." He looked down, shame washing over him. "I was scared." "I know," she said softly. "But I was scared too, and I didn't have the option of running from that fear. I had to carry it, every day, through the pregnancy, through the nights when both of them would scream for hours, through the bills and the loneliness and the doubt. I did it, not because I was a hero, but because there was no other choice." Adrian looked up at her, his voice barely a whisper. "I want to know them." Isabella didn't reply right away. Her eyes searched his face, as if she were looking for something. The truth, perhaps, or regret, or a change. "I'm not going to stop you," she said finally. "But don't you dare walk into their lives unless you plan on staying. I'm not going to let them have their hearts broken by someone who only visits when it's convenient. They don't know who you are yet. To them, you were just a nice customer who bought flowers. If this is just about guilt or curiosity, walk away now. Save them that." "It's not that," Adrian said, shaking his head. "I didn't know, Isabella, but now I do. And I can't unknow it. I want to be in their lives. I don't care how long it takes. I'll earn it." She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She just studied him in silence. Then the door opened, and 2 little faces peered around the corner. "Mama, the delivery truck is here," Martina announced, her cheeks pink from running. Isabella turned to them. "Okay, I'm coming." The girls looked at Adrian curiously, sensing something, but saying nothing. When they disappeared again, Adrian stood up, his legs stiff. "I'll come back," he said, "only if you want me to." Isabella opened the door and walked past him. "We'll see," she said over her shoulder. "Time will tell if you mean it." Adrian walked out of the flower shop for the 2nd time in a week, but this time something was different. The first time, he had walked out as a stranger. Now, he was a father. Not yet in their eyes, but in truth. And that truth would change everything. Adrian began to come back to the flower shop every few days, careful not to overwhelm or push too hard. Every visit was quiet, deliberate, and filled with a sense of cautious hope. He didn't demand conversation or explanations. He simply showed up. Sometimes he would buy a bouquet. Sometimes he would ask about certain plants. And other times he would just sit on the wooden bench outside the shop, drinking coffee and watching the world go by. Isabella didn't greet him with warmth, but she didn't turn him away either. That, in itself, felt like progress. The twins, Clara and Martina, still didn't know who he really was, but the connection between them was undeniable. They were drawn to him, and he to them, in a way that neither logic nor time could erase. On his fourth visit, Martina ran up to him with a dandelion crown she had made and insisted that he wear it on his head, like a king of the flowers. Adrian, who had once negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking, found himself crouching in the dirt, proudly wearing a crooked ring of weeds made by a little girl with bright blue eyes. Clara joined in, declaring him officially a part of the garden. That moment cracked something open in him that he hadn't realized was still closed. Isabella watched it all from behind the counter. Her gaze lingered longer now, and though her posture remained cautious, there was a softness that was creeping in. Adrian didn't ask her questions about the past. He knew he didn't have the right. Instead, he started to learn about the present, how Martina loved to finger paint flowers and always mixed purple and yellow because it makes magic, and how Clara liked to line up all the plant labels in perfect rows and hated her sister moving even one of them. He memorized their favorite snacks, their patterns of laughter, the way both of them would scrunch up their noses when they were confused. He collected these pieces in silence, treasuring each new discovery as if they were rare jewels. One afternoon, after helping the girls sort tulip bulbs, Adrian stayed as Isabella closed the shop. She didn't speak at first, just swept the floor and organized the workspace. But then she looked at him with a curious expression. "You really didn't know," she said in a low voice, more to herself than to him. "No," he replied, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Isabella leaned against the counter, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. "They're good girls, strong, kind, but they've never had a father, and they never asked why. I guess I always hoped that if I kept things normal, they would never feel the emptiness." Adrian moved closer, his voice firm, but breaking. "I'm not asking you to erase what I missed. I know I can't just walk in and make up for 5 years, but I'm here now, and I don't want to be someone they barely know." She looked down at the floor for a long moment. Then she looked up at him. "They trust easily. It's one of the best things about them, and one of the hardest. Don't be the reason they stop believing in people." "I won't," he said, without hesitation. That weekend, Adrian offered to help deliver flowers for a wedding. It was one of the busiest events of the year for the shop, and Isabella was overwhelmed with the logistics. She hesitated at first, reluctant to mix him into her business, but after a moment of deliberation, she handed him a clipboard and a key to the delivery van. "If you break anything," she warned, "you're paying the full price." Adrian smiled. Deal. What she didn't expect was for him to show up not just as muscle, but as someone who genuinely cared. He carried arrangements as if they were fragile treasures. He followed the checklist meticulously, and he even charmed the anxious mother of the bride when a last-minute change caused a brief panic. When they returned late that night, exhausted but satisfied, Isabella looked at him differently. Not like a ghost from the past, but like a man who was trying, truly trying, to belong in her present. The twins were asleep in the back room, curled up in a nest of blankets and stuffed animals and coloring books. Adrian knelt beside them, adjusting Clara's blanket and brushing a lock of hair from Martina's forehead. The sight of them sleeping so peacefully, so trustingly, brought a tear to his eye. He wasn't sure if Isabella noticed, but she said nothing, just stood behind him in silence. When he stood up, she finally asked, "What made you stop that day?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "The day you came in here," she clarified. "It wasn't on your schedule, was it? You don't seem like the type to wander into small flower shops by accident." Adrian smiled faintly. "I was on my way to a proposal. I stopped to buy flowers. And then I saw you, Everything changed in a second. Isabella took that in, nodding slowly. It's funny how life works. I canceled the dinner. I never gave her the ring, he admitted. For the first time, Isabella didn't hide her expression. It was surprise, confusion, maybe even a trace of hope. She looked away quickly, but Adrian had seen it. That night, as he walked out of the shop and down the quiet street under the amber glow of the streetlights, he realized something profound. He had spent his life chasing things that made him feel powerful. Now, for the first time, he was chasing something that made him feel whole, and this time, he wasn't going to run. It was a warm Sunday morning when Adrian arrived at the flower shop and found something different waiting for him. The front door was open, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting golden stripes on the wooden floor, and giggles echoed from the back garden. He followed the sound instinctively, not knowing if he was invited, but too drawn to care. What he saw took his breath away. Martina and Clara were crouched on the grass, their small hands covered in dirt, carefully planting something in ceramic pots. Isabella was kneeling beside them, her hair in a loose ponytail, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, smiling softly as she guided their hands. Adrian didn't speak. He just stood quietly by the door, watching all three of them in their peaceful joy. It felt like a window into a life that could have been his all along, if he hadn't let fear control him. Finally, Clara saw him and waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Adrian, do you want to help us plant fairy carrots?" He smiled and walked into the garden, squatting down beside them. "Fairy carrots, huh? That sounds like some high-level gardening." "They're just regular carrots," Martina whispered dramatically, "but we say they're fairy carrots so they grow faster." "That's the secret." Isabella shot him a look then, something between amusement and warning, but she didn't stop him. For the next hour, Adrian gave himself over to the rhythm of their world, digging in the dirt, pretending to hear fairies whispering in the wind, and getting scolded by Clara for not spacing the seeds correctly. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business plans or investor pressure. He was just there, with his knees in the dirt, laughter in his chest, surrounded by the family he was only just beginning to understand. Later that afternoon, as the girls napped inside, Isabella poured them each a glass of lemonade and sat with him on the small patio bench. Her posture was more relaxed than usual, the set of her shoulders looser, but Adrian could still feel the distance between them. It wasn't coldness, it was caution. She wasn't protecting herself, she was protecting her daughters. "I've been thinking," she said after a long silence, "about what it would really mean to let you in. I don't mean for an afternoon or a couple of weekends a month. I mean, truly, in their lives, in their world, in mine." Adrian nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of his glass. "I've been thinking about it too." She turned to him slightly, her expression unreadable. "I don't need your money, Adrian. I've been doing this alone for 5 years. If this is some kind of guilt-driven offer to fix things with a check, please don't." "It's not that," he said firmly. "I know I can't undo what I did or what I didn't do. I missed their first steps. I wasn't there for the sleepless nights, or the school plays, or the fevers. But I want to be here now. I want to know them. I want them to know me." Isabella looked away toward the garden. Her jaw tightened for a moment. "You don't get to just show up and take the easy parts. You don't get the nice moments and the birthday parties if you can't be here for the tantrums and the homework and the days when everything goes wrong. I need to know that if they fall in love with you, you won't disappear." "I won't," he said. And this time, there was no hesitation, no corporate polish, no performance, just the truth. She was silent again. Then she nodded slowly. "Then let's go slow. No labels, no big announcements, just time." Over the next few weeks, Adrian became a regular presence, not just at the shop, but in their lives. He would pick up the girls from preschool when Isabella was overwhelmed. He learned their routines, their favorite breakfast cereals, which stuffed animal went everywhere with them, the exact way Martina liked her shoelaces tied. He discovered that Clara was afraid of thunderstorms and started calling her during rainy nights just to tell her stories until she fell asleep. Sometimes it was messy and awkward and exhausting, but it was real. One night, while cleaning up after closing, Isabella handed him a small envelope with a hesitant look. Inside was a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures, 2 adults and 2 children, standing in front of a flower shop. One of the adult figures had blonde hair. "Martina made it," she said in a low voice. "She said it was a picture of her real family. I didn't tell her to." Adrian stared at this drawing for a long moment, something tight and overwhelming blooming in his chest. He folded it carefully and put it in his wallet without saying a word. They didn't talk about the future after that. Not yet. They didn't use words like family or together or us. But in the quiet spaces, between shared tasks, whispered goodnights, and the smell of warm soil, they were slowly building something. A fragile, uncertain beginning. And for the first time in his adult life, Adrian didn't want to race to the finish line. He just wanted to be there, every step of the way. Adrian had finally found a rhythm, one that no longer depended on board meetings or press releases, but flowed with school pickups, flower shop deliveries, and bedtime stories told over the phone when he couldn't be there in person. His days, once meticulously segmented by his assistant, now revolved around the unpredictability of 2 5-year-olds who could turn a trip to the grocery store into an adventure or an emotional crisis. But he loved it. He embraced the mess, the softness it brought out in him, and the quiet satisfaction of being present in a way he never had before. Isabella had begun to trust him more, not completely, not yet, but enough to let him take the girls out alone. They went to the park together, a small science museum, and even a puppet show that barely survived, thanks to Martina's habit of loudly correcting the puppets when they got their animal facts wrong. Mornings were his favorite part. Sometimes he would arrive early with coffee for Isabella and muffins for the girls, and they would sit on the curb outside the shop before the day began. Clara would talk about her dreams, always filled with flying animals and trees, while Martina would try to convince Adrian to invest in a lemonade stand they hadn't built yet. He would smile, nod, and ask follow-up questions. These small, fleeting, chaotic conversations anchored him more than any corporate strategy. But that peace didn't last. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything was about to unravel. Adrian had just returned from a delivery when he saw her. Veronica, standing outside the flower shop in 6-inch heels and a designer coat, looking completely out of place among the buckets of tulips and wooden crates. She had her arms crossed, her expression sharp, and when she saw him through the glass, she opened the door as if she owned the building. Isabella looked up from the counter, confused. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. Veronica's eyes didn't leave Adrian. "I'm here for him." Adrian froze. His past and his present had just collided, and it was loud and dazzling and messy. "Veronica, not here," he said quickly, trying to usher her outside, but she wouldn't move. "Oh, we're doing this now, Adrian, because I've been patient. I gave you space, but you've disappeared off the face of the earth, and now I find out through a mutual friend that you're playing house in a flower shop with your ex and her children." Isabella's face changed immediately. "Excuse me," she said, her voice suddenly hard. Veronica turned on her. "You didn't know. He was supposed to propose to me the day he walked in here. We were engaged in all but name. And now he's what? Faking being father of the year? Adrian stepped between them. That's enough. Both of you. This isn't what it looks like. Veronica's voice was cold. Then explain it. Isabella's jaw was so tight he thought it might break. You were engaged? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I was going to propose, yes, but I didn't, because I saw you, and I saw them. Everything changed that day, he said, desperate for her to believe him. Isabella didn't reply. She simply walked into the back room without another word, leaving Veronica standing in silence, and Adrian too stunned to move. The girls came out a few moments later, holding up drawings they had made. Martina proudly showed one to Adrian. It's you and us at the zoo, she said cheerfully. Veronica's expression crumbled when she saw it. She looked at Adrian one last time, something bitter in her eyes. Then she turned and left without saying anything else. That night, Adrian returned to the shop after it had closed. He knocked on the back door like a stranger, not knowing if he would be allowed in. Isabella answered, not angry, but tired. There was something deeper in her expression now. Not betrayal, but heartbreak. You should have told me, she said in a low voice, her arms crossed over her chest. Not just about her, about everything. I was afraid, he admitted. I thought if I told you everything too soon, I would ruin it. That if I explained how messy my life was, you would close the door before I had a chance to fix things. Isabella sat down on the old bench by the tool wall. I'm not angry that you had someone else. I'm angry that you didn't trust me enough to be honest. I do trust you, he said quickly, sitting down beside her. I'm still learning how to be honest, not just with you, but with myself. I thought success meant keeping everything perfect and polished, but life isn't like that. You've known that for longer than I have. She didn't speak for a while. The silence stretched, and he didn't try to fill it. Finally, she said. The girls asked where you went today. I told them you had a meeting. I'm not going anywhere, he said, unless you ask me to. Isabella turned to him, her eyes tired but clear. If you want to stay in our lives, Adrian, you have to show them that love isn't something that goes away when things get messy. You have to show them that people can be flawed and still stay. He nodded. I will. For the first time since that afternoon's explosion, she leaned into him. Not fully, not with her whole weight, but just enough for him to feel it. A signal of trust, fragile and real. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't try to make promises. He just stayed beside her in the silence, knowing that rebuilding something real was going to take time, effort, and everything he had left to give. Adrian didn't expect forgiveness to come quickly, and he didn't ask for it. What he did instead was show up. Every morning, every afternoon, even when the air between him and Isabella felt too quiet, too tense, he kept coming. He watered plants, swept the shop floors, ran errands to the supply store without being asked, and left fresh coffee on the counter, with her usual order written on the lid in a shaky pen. The twins greeted him with the same unfiltered joy they always had, but Isabella was taking her time. He understood. Trust, once broken, wasn't glued back together with apologies. It was slowly sewn back through consistency. Veronica didn't return, but the damage she left behind lingered. Isabella had unasked questions, and Adrian could feel it in the way she moved around him, carefully, deliberately, as if she were waiting to see if this version of him would also fade. But something shifted the morning he arrived early and found Isabella sitting alone in the back garden, wrapped in a cardigan, her face downcast. She didn't hear him at first. When she turned to look out at him, her eyes were teary but clear. They had a school event yesterday, she said in a low voice. a small art show. Parents were invited. I didn't tell you because I didn't know if you should be there. I thought it might confuse them. But when I got there and saw all the other kids with two parents at their side, I don't know. I felt selfish, like I was hiding something from them. Adrian sat down beside her without hesitation. You were protecting them. I thought I was, she whispered, but maybe I was just protecting myself. He didn't answer right away. The air smelled of damp earth and lavender. Isabella, I want to be there, not just for the fun stuff, for the hard stuff too. I want them to know they're not half-loved. I want you to know that too. Her eyes searched his face for a moment, as if testing the sincerity behind his words. Then she nodded slightly, and for the first time, she invited him into something that mattered. The next week, she forwarded him the girls' school calendar and invited him to their next parent-teacher conference. He arrived early. In a shirt Martina had picked out for him because it was the color of blueberries, and sat in a chair too small for him, listening intently as the teacher talked about how Clara was already reading at a second-grade level and Martina had an inexhaustible imagination. Afterward, the girls drew a congratulatory picture for themselves and made him hang it in his car. But Adrian wasn't content with just being present. He wanted to give back in a bigger way, to show he had grown not just as a father, but as a man. One night, long after the shop had closed, he stayed up drawing out an idea he couldn't shake. He remembered Isabella once telling him how difficult it had been to find affordable suppliers, and how complicated it was to manage inventory while also raising twins. He thought about other small businesses, especially those run by single parents, and realized he might be able to build something useful. Not a startup to impress investors or get press coverage, but a platform that made life easier for people like Isabella. He called in a few favors, assembled a small team of engineers and designers he trusted, and spent his nights in a co-working space, bringing the idea to life. It would be a logistics and ordering platform tailored for small, independent florists and local artisan businesses, simplifying supply chains, helping manage orders, and even creating a marketplace for people to promote their services. He didn't tell Isabella about it right away. He wanted to build something real before he offered it to her. Weeks later, when the first prototype was live and initial tests were working, he brought it to the shop on a quiet afternoon. She was organizing a display for the weekend market, and he waited until the girls had gone to bed in the back room. "I've been working on something," he said, placing his laptop on the counter. "It's not just for you, but you were the reason it started." Isabella was skeptical, but curious. As he walked her through the platform, showing her the features, the supplier map, the automated pricing suggestions, and the order history dashboard, she remained silent. When he finished, she didn't speak for a long time. "You built this for people like me?" He nodded. "I built it because I saw how hard you worked, and I realized how many people probably struggle the same way. It's not perfect, but it's a start. If you want, I'd love for your shop to be the first to use it." Then she smiled. Not fully, not completely, but in a way that made him feel like he had just climbed another invisible wall. "I'll try it," she said. "No promises. That's all I ask." That night, as he gathered his things and turned to leave, Isabella called his name. He turned, his eyebrows raised. "You're doing good," she said softly. And that simple phrase meant more than any approval he had ever received from boardrooms or billionaires. It wasn't validation. It was trust. Growing. Slowly. At last. Adrian never realized how much space love could take up in a life until it started filling all the small, quiet places in his. It wasn't loud or dramatic like he used to imagine romance would be. It was soft, woven into daily routines, in the way Martina would tug on his sleeve when she needed help tying her shoes, in how Clara insisted that he be the one to read the bedtime story because she liked the voices he made for the characters. It was in the way Isabella slowly began to say we instead of I when she talked about the shop, and in how she no longer hesitated to text him when she needed help. They had created a rhythm, not just in logistics, but in something deeper. A quiet understanding that they were building something fragile but worth protecting. Isabella had agreed to officially include the flower shop on Adrian's platform, and the changes were immediate. She was able to reduce her supplier costs by almost 30%. She started getting next-day deliveries, and she even began offering subscription floral arrangements, something she had always wanted to try, but had never had the resources for. She still didn't give Adrian all the credit. She was stubborn and proud, and he respected it. But he could see that she was proud of him. It was in the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't noticing, or in the way she would brush her fingers against his shoulder as she walked past him in the shop. The girls continued to flourish. They had started asking more questions, curious, careful. Why did Mr. Adrian always come over? Was he staying for dinner again? Could he come to school and meet their friends? It was Isabella who finally sat them down and told them, with Adrian by her side, that he was more than a friend, that he was their daddy. The word didn't land with the weight he thought it might. It didn't cause anger or confusion. It came with wide-eyed, quiet awe, and Clara, always the bolder of the two, simply climbed into his lap and asked if that meant he now had to come to all the birthday parties forever. He laughed and said yes, and she said, "Good, because we were going to make you a crown next time." It was one of the happiest nights of his life, but it was also the beginning of something heavier, a responsibility that now had a name. Daddy. Not just the biological truth he had been dodging for months, but the full meaning of it. Someone who shows up. Always. Someone who doesn't break promises. Someone who stays when things get hard. Adrian knew this, and it terrified him. The first real test came when Martina got sick. It wasn't the flu or a cold, but a sudden, unexplained fever that wouldn't break. Isabella took her to the emergency room after a long night of watching her temperature climb, and Adrian met them there in 20 minutes, having dropped everything he was doing. It wasn't serious in the end, just a virus. But sitting beside Martina's small hospital bed, holding her clammy hand as she slept, Adrian realized how helpless fatherhood could feel. He couldn't fix it. He couldn't negotiate with it, or reason with it, or out-strategize it. All he could do was be there, and he was, for every minute, every hour. Isabella fell asleep in the corner while he watched over Martina, his eyes never leaving her. The nurse who came in the morning mistook them for a married couple. Isabella gently corrected her, but something passed between them afterward. It wasn't tension, something more akin to curiosity, a question neither of them was quite ready to ask out loud. Adrian started staying over more often after that. At first, it was only when Isabella had early deliveries or late inventory nights, and then it became a regular part of the week. He would wake up to the smell of fresh coffee, Martina already in the living room, watching cartoons, Clara curled up under his arm. It felt natural, but it also made him more aware of the lingering fragility of what they had. He hadn't told her he loved her yet. He didn't want to say the words just to say them. He wanted them to mean something. But every day it got harder not to let them slip out. One Saturday morning, as they were getting ready for the city's spring market, Isabella tripped over a pile of empty buckets and fell hard against a shelf, cutting her arm. It wasn't deep, but it bled enough to need attention. Adrian rushed to her side, his hands shaking more than he wanted to admit, as he helped her sit down and held a towel against the cut. "You're bleeding too much," he muttered, trying to stay calm. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth, but her face had gone pale. "You're not," he replied, already pulling out his phone to call an ambulance. Isabella grabbed his hand. "Adrian, look at me. I'm fine." Her breath hitched, and their eyes met. "I'm not. You scared me to death." His hand tightened around hers. "I know, but I'm still here." He didn't call the ambulance. They bandaged it themselves, sitting side by side in the back room, a first aid kit between them and the smell of soil in the air. She let her head rest on his shoulder, and he let the silence fill everything they didn't say. That night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Adrian found Isabella standing on the porch, her injured arm bandaged, her hair tousled, barefoot in the moonlight. He walked up behind her and slid his hand into hers. "Are you still afraid?" she asked him softly. "Terrified," he admitted, "but not of life, just of losing you." Isabella turned to face him, her expression soft. "Then don't." He kissed her then, not out of passion, or out of the moment, or out of impulse, but out of something real and deeply earned. It wasn't fireworks. It was steadier than that, like roots settling into the earth, finding their place. And for the first time, Adrian knew he wasn't building a life alone anymore. He was finally a part of something, and he would protect it with everything he had. Spring turned into summer, and with it came a softening of the spaces between everyone. The shop was running more fluidly than ever now. Orders were consistent. The new platform Adrian had built was gaining traction with other local businesses, and Isabella's stress over logistics and late deliveries had faded into something manageable. But more importantly, the quiet, daily chaos of family life had settled into something whole. There was morning laughter, kitchen dance parties, sleepy movie nights tangled in blankets on the couch, and moments where Adrian would catch Isabella looking at him, not with doubt or worry, but with something warm and unreserved, as if trust had finally taken root. One Friday afternoon, they had a picnic at the park after the girls finished their last day of kindergarten. Clara had demanded they bring balloons, and Martina insisted on cupcakes, so they did both. Isabella was wearing a sundress Adrian hadn't seen before, her hair tied back with a ribbon the same pale yellow color as the cupcake frosting. She looked radiant, even after dealing with two excited girls all morning. Adrian had never been so content in silence, lying on the grass, Martina asleep on his chest, Clara curled in Isabella's lap, the scent of sun and grass all around. It was one of those rare afternoons where everything slowed down, and he felt, for once, that he wasn't chasing time, but living it. Later that night, after the girls were tucked into bed with promises of pancakes and cartoons in the morning, Isabella walked into the living room and found Adrian quietly looking through an old photo album that had been left on the coffee table. He was looking at a picture of Isabella from 6 years ago, her face younger, freer, holding a newborn wrapped in a soft pink blanket. There were tears in his eyes when he looked up. "I missed all of this," he said in a low voice. "I missed their first laughs, their first words. I missed watching you become this woman who built a world from nothing. And no matter what I do now, I can never get that time back." Isabella sat beside him, her hand brushing his. "You're here now. That matters more than you think." He closed the album, turning to face her fully. "I know we've taken it slow. I know we've had to undo a lot of damage. But Isabella, I love you. I've loved you since before I even understood what love really meant. And I don't want to be just someone in your life. I want to be your life. All of it. The hard parts, the boring parts, the parts that make you want to scream and cry and laugh, and everything in between." Isabella didn't speak at first. She looked at him for a long moment, as if she was trying to read something beyond the words. Then she leaned in and kissed him gently, as if she had been waiting for the right moment to let go of everything she had been holding back. When they separated, she whispered, "I love you too." She had been afraid to say it, not because she didn't feel it, but because she didn't want to lose it again. "You won't," he promised. Ever. The next morning, they took the girls to the farmer's market together, and for the first time, Adrian introduced them as his daughters. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, just pride in his voice and a light in their eyes when he said the word, "Daddy." It felt so natural now, so true, as if it had always belonged to him and had simply taken him too long to claim it. Weeks later, on a quiet Sunday, he took them all to the botanical garden just outside the city. It was Isabella's favorite place, though she rarely had time to visit. The girls ran ahead, chasing butterflies, and Adrian led Isabella to a small gazebo overlooking the lily pond. There, with no audience, no spectacle, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. "I'm not asking you because it's the next step," he said. "I'm asking you because you're the first person who has ever made me feel like I was home. You and the girls, you gave me my life back, and I want to spend the rest of it building something with you. No more running, no more fear, just us, and all the messy, beautiful days that are waiting for us." Isabella's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. She didn't need grand words. She simply said yes, and kissed him as if she meant it. The girls, seeing the embrace from a distance, ran back, screaming, "What happened? Did you find a bug?" And when Isabella told them they were going to be a family, officially, they danced around the gazebo and declared it the best day of their lives. The wedding was simple, held in the backyard garden of the flower shop, with only close friends and a few curious neighbors. Martina and Clara walked down the aisle as flower girls, tossing petals with wild enthusiasm. And Isabella wore the same sundress she had worn to the picnic because, in her words, it felt like the beginning. Adrian couldn't stop smiling. Not when he said his vows, not when Isabella said hers, not even when Martina dropped the ring and Clara had to fish it out of the grass, laughing the whole time. There were no fairy tale illusions. There were no promises of perfection. Just a shared understanding that they had already walked through fire and still found their way back to each other. And that was more than enough. Adrian once thought that success was about status, about achievements and money and reputation. But standing in that garden, surrounded by people who knew the full story, who had seen the worst and still chose to be a part of the best, he understood that real success was simpler, deeper, and much harder to earn. It was the love that stayed, the family that chose you back, and a life that didn't need to be perfect, just real. And finally, he had it all. Hello, everyone. I hope this story of second chances resonated with your hearts. What moment in Adrian and Isabella's story touched you the most? Do you believe forgiveness is earned with words or with actions? If you liked this story of redemption and love, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Comment below with a heart emoji if you believe the family you choose is as strong as the one you inherit. And to not miss more unforgettable stories, subscribe.